hope you enjoy today's topic.
Hello and welcome to Healthy Hernando. My name is Ann Gail Ellis. I'm a health educator with the Hernando County Health Department. Today's topic is one that we've presented in the past, but there's been some changes since we last presented this, so I've invited our guest back again. Our guest is Mr. Herb Wagner. Mr. Herb Wagner is the president and founder of A Man's Pink, which is an advocacy program for male breast cancer. And so today I want to cover a lot of the topics we covered last time, which is signs and symptoms, diagnosis, prognosis, things like that, but also talk about the advances you've made with the coalition or your organization, because I understand it's spread to more and more states since we have talked to you last.
It is.
So with that, let me introduce Mr. Herb Wagner.
Hi.
Mr. Wagner, you are a part-time resident in Hernando County, is that
Yes,
correct?
well, yes, my main residence is here, but it gets too hot in the summer, so I go to Canada for 3 or 4 months.
Okay, great. And what part of Canada do you
Near Toronto, London, Ontario.
Okay, and did you initiate A Man's Pink in Canada or here in the States?
When we started the website, we chose a site hosting out of Canada.ca, and we did our original incorporation in Canada last October, but then in January of this year we incorporated into the U.S. as well, in Florida, and we just received our 501c nonprofit charitable status.
Very good. Now, as of this time, are you the single force behind this initiative, or have you established a group that's working on this?
I'm working with 2 other male breast cancer organizations, Out of the Shadow of Pink, which was founded by Kathy Reed and her husband. He passed away in 2008, and also Brandon Greening Foundation, which Kathy was working very closely with, and her husband died last year at the age of 37.
Wow, yeah.
So the 3 organizations are working at establishing the 3rd week of October as Male Breast Cancer Awareness Week. So far we've got Florida and Pennsylvania on board for last year, and for this October we have committed Massachusetts, California, and we're talking with South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, as well as we did get the province of Ontario in December for next year.
Very good. Well, so you've made a lot of progress since our last visit, and I want to talk more about those initiatives, but I think we should back up. I jumped ahead a little bit. Let's back up a little bit and talk about male breast cancer. We know that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and most people concentrate on females for
Right.
Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I think this is great that you've picked that month to
take
work
1 week and trying to make awareness for men. The problem with male breast cancer is most men, a lot of people in general don't know, and most men don't know that they can get breast cancer. So therefore, our survival rate is approximately 10% lower than for women. And that's mainly because men are diagnosed later at a more advanced stage. So if we can get the awareness out there, we can get them in, get it looked at, and then their survival rates will increase. Men's breast cancer is sort of where women's breast cancer was 25 years ago, before the big, heavy programs, initiatives to increase awareness that were sponsored and supported by the cancer societies. And that's what brought awareness to women, and that's what increased early detection and therefore survival rates.
Yeah, and it's a big deal now.
Right, and so we can do the same for men.
Right, and I think that's great that you're incorporating it into the Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Now, let me just ask you a question about male breast cancer. It is, does your organization encourage men to do monthly self-exams as women are encouraged to do?
It's not as important for men in general, but if there's any history of breast cancer, any history at all in the family, then they are more prone or susceptible to developing breast cancer. So any sign, the important thing is anything you notice, any change, get it looked at. It could be nothing, but if you notice a lump, if you notice redness or scaling or itching, discharge, and I mean the big one is the inverted nipple, get it looked at. But the most important thing is when you notice a change. So be aware when you shower, you know, be aware. And anytime you notice a change, that's when you need to get it looked at, and don't push it away.
And what kind of a doctor would a man go to if he noticed some
Well,
changes?
a general practitioner, but insist, you know, your family doctor, but insist that he look at it, and if you're not happy with what he's doing, go see somebody else.
Now tell us your personal story. How did you identify your breast cancer? What was the
Well, back
process?
in 2004, I had hip replaced and shoulder surgery, and near the end of September, I noticed that the nipple, my right nipple, started to look a little funny. And I didn't do anything right away because I had an appointment scheduled for a physical with my family doctor in Ohio on October 15th. So when I went in to see him, I brought it to his attention. I said, you know, this nipple has started to look kind of funny. He looked and says, yeah, that's interesting. Nothing to worry about. So I came south for the winter, and it was in March that family physician here, Dr. Blackburn, I went in to see him about a cyst on my neck, and when I took off my shirt, he looked at the nipple, and 5 minutes later I was scheduled for a mammogram. And within 11 days they removed the breast and told me, they did the first exam on Wednesday, they did a mammogram Thursday, a biopsy Friday, and Monday I was told I had breast cancer, and they did a mastectomy the following Monday.
Wow. Now, following the mastectomy, did you have any radiation or chemo or anything?
No, I was very fortunate in that the tumor was estrogen, progesterone receptor positive. So that meant there was no chemo or radiation, but I was 5 years on Arimidex, or hormone therapy, which they're not without their side effects as well. I mean, there's strong major drugs. It's not as bad as doing chemo or radiation, but there still are some major effects to hormone therapy. And it was surprising that, like I got off to that 2 years ago, but there was an oncologist at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is associated with Harvard, that contacted us, that she did started to do a survey for male breast cancer and asked our websites if we would try and recruit men. And she had 44 men fill out a questionnaire, and she actually just presented the results last September. And they are now available on our website, and it shows some of that there is going to get some information, and they're starting to look into the effects of male breast cancer on men and the treatment. So we are starting to make some headway.
Yeah, yeah, important subject. Now, although, would you consider this rare for men?
Well, it's very rare. It's about 1% of all breast cancer is diagnosed in men. So about 2,000 men in the United States and about 200 men a year in Canada are diagnosed, and about 450 men in the U.S. and about 45 men in Canada will die each year. So it's very hard to get support when the numbers are so low.
Right. Well, it's rare as in a population, but when it affects you.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like 7 years ago, after I was diagnosed, I went online, and there was very, very little information available. There was essentially none.
Right.
And now, that's why we developed our website, which launched in 2009. And we're averaging, last week we had 144 hits.
Wow.
So we've come a long way. We had over 10,000 hits in the first 2.5 years.
Yeah, you must be very proud. Your daughters must be very proud. I understand they kind of were with you at the beginning. Are they still real involved?
Oh yes, they're very heavily involved in it. And we've, as I mentioned, we did, there's a gentleman in Houston, Texas who has battled cancer twice, but they lost his wife's sister to breast cancer, and he's very, very wealthy. So he painted one of his oil wells pink and donated $1 million to breast cancer research and treatment, and various organizations applied for funding. His grants were in matching dollar for dollar funds raised to the organizations. And we were fortunate enough to become part of that. And so that started in January and actually ends in May 15th.
And what are you doing with the grant dollars?
Well, that'll help us to continue. I mean, I'm spending up until this point, I've spent my own money to do all the promotion and awareness. And, you know, we buy lapel pins and golf ball markers and do the video, the hosting and the running of the website, and when I go out to speak. Mm-hmm. So we're going to use that money just to continue and increase the amount that we can do to increase awareness.
That's fabulous. Thank you very much for all you do. Now, do you do speaking? Do you travel to speak to groups?
I will speak anywhere at any time. Yes, yeah. And
now, did you have a history of breast cancer in your family?
None. There's no history of cancer at all, and no breast cancer whatsoever. It's you know, there are risks associated with developing breast cancer for women, and alcohol consumption, and obviously hereditary and family history. But I worked as a chemist, which is also can be a risk for any type of cancer, you know. But there was no history at all in the family, and I guess I just attribute it to the fact that, you know, we, as a scientist, which I am, I have a little different philosophy in saying that, you know, everybody is predisposed to disease, and cancer or heart disease or whatever. And some people get it and some people don't. It's just sort of a luck of the draw. Mm-hmm. And all of the factors that combine, some of them may increase your risks, chances, and but it boils down to you as an individual.
Right. Now, your daughters, I assume that they both are very proactive in their own personal self-exams.
Yes. Well, once I was diagnosed, I was very fortunate in that my youngest daughter is a senior pathologist assistant, and she's working with Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo. So I underwent genetic testing there for the BRCA1, BRCA2 mutations and that was not so much for me, but more for them to know that their potential risk later on. And they're 35 and 36, and they've both had their baseline mammograms a couple of years ago.
And everything's okay?
Everything's fine. And I was BRCA1, 2, BRCA negative, so.
Well, let's talk about your life since your diagnosis. Now, you're very fortunate you're a 7-year survivor. Right. I assume you have annual exams, or every 6 months? Or
oh yeah, after 5 years it's once a year. I mean, I have a physical twice a year with my family doctor, but I see my oncologist once a year.
Has your lifestyle changed at all since your diagnosis?
Yeah, I try to eat healthier, try to lose weight, but that's a never-ending battle. But alcohol. See, I worked for a brewery for 25 years in Canada, and that's another symptom or risk factor for breast cancer is alcohol consumption. So I've tried to cut back and tried to be a little more healthy, more exercise, and
yeah. All those things that we all know to do, exercise more, everything in moderation,
right.
You know, that kind of stuff. Since cigarette smoking is affiliated with everything else bad, I'm assuming that there's a connection between cigarette smoking and breast cancer as well.
Well, there probably is. I mean, it's a link to all cancers, really.
Yeah.
But
were you ever a smoker?
Well, I did for, when I was 16 to maybe 30.
Yeah.
But very heavily. But then I think it was 31 years old I quit and haven't touched it since.
Yeah. So. Well, good. So you're living a clean life now, as much as you can.
As much as I can. Yeah. There has to be some little,
Well, benefit. And stress. Stress management is another indicator for chronic disease too. So I imagine you have to. The moderation thing comes in every time.
It does. And being retired, my stress is now on the golf course. So
that's a good stress to have.
Well, yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the organization. It is now a 501c3. It's being recognized in more and more states, hopefully. When you say that it's now being recognized in Massachusetts or you're working on these different states, how do you do that? Do you go call the governor's office?
Well, what we've done is try to get one of the state representatives here in Hernando County. I started with the Board of County Commissioners and then ended up Representative Schenck introduced a resolution into the Florida House. Representative Merck introduced into Pennsylvania. I don't know who the representative was in Massachusetts, but I've been talking with representatives at the state level and trying to get them to introduce it. And hopefully what we're after is to introduce a resolution to establish the third week of October as Male Breast Cancer Awareness Week in their respective states. Once we get that, we were fortunate this year that Congressman Nugent did a 1-minute talk on the U.S. House of Representatives about male breast cancer on our behalf. So it's just trying to get information out there because early detection is going to save lives.
Yeah. You know, our local media here in Hernando County is a wonderful resource for getting information out.
Right.
Have you done anything with the local newspapers?
No, actually, yes. I've written a couple articles with the Hernando Today. Chris Wessel, yes, and they've supported us very well. Hopefully this year in October, when the resolution is presented again in Tallahassee, I'm hoping to be there and trying to get news coverage at that point.
Yeah.
And
we have local radio too that oftentimes will. Have you been on the radio also?
I was on with Bob
Penrod?
Right, once, yes.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're doing all the right things to get the word out. That's excellent.
That's what it's all about. I mean, we can, a little effort, and we can bring male breast cancer awareness, treatment, and survival rates into the 21st century, and that's our goal.
That's excellent. You know, and I think another option might be getting information out into work sites. You referenced this gentleman who was 37 when he died of breast cancer, obviously in the prime of his working life.
Right.
So maybe that's an outreach area that we can help with.
Yeah, that would be greatly appreciated.
Tell me about the grant that you received where you created this video.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that might be one way that work sites could get some information out to their staff.
Right. That video is being hosted on pinkwell.org until the end of the challenge, which is May 15th. And what that involved is I have now a list of about 39 or 40 men around the world that are breast cancer survivors. And I asked them who would be willing to provide their information, a photo. So we put together a slideshow, a 4-minute video that talks about our organization, A Man's Pink, but then also shows the information of 15 men from the United States, Canada, one from Australia, one from England, the dates they were diagnosed, and then we had 4 women who supplied photos of their husband, both Kathy Reed and Connie Greening, who I'm working closely with their organizations, as well as 2 other men who had passed away. As well, one of the friends of mine I met, who was a breast cancer survivor in Toronto, Murray Pollard, he and his partner wrote a 4-minute song entitled, "In Pink There Is a Shade of Blue." And we've also wrote a poem and put it to words as well. And that's called That's Why We've Added the Blue. And both of those songs are on the video. They're also on our website at malebreastcancer.ca. The whole versions are on there.
Okay. Now, the malebreastcancer.ca, did I get that right?
Yes, that's our organization.
And we're putting that on the video as we're taping today, but I'm glad that we went ahead and said it. And I want to make sure that we say it a couple of more times today. And in reference to that, real quick, let's say somebody's in the listening audience today and says, I want to get involved in that. How can they do that?
Well, on the website, there's direct contact. There's a contact tab. There's about, I think, 27 tabs, and one of them is a contact tab, which will come directly to me. It also has my cell phone number.
Okay.
So I'm available at any time, and I will usually respond within 12 to 24 hours.
Okay. Well, excellent. So if anybody out there has had this diagnosis or known someone who has had this diagnosis and maybe been looking for just the right way they want to support breast cancer or men's health or whatever, so this might be a way that you might be able to contribute. That's fabulous. Let's talk a little bit. We talked about 10% of all breast cancer diagnoses.
1%.
1%. Okay.
Yeah.
1% of all breast cancer diagnoses are male.
Yeah.
What is the survival rate of male breast cancer?
We're about 79% compared to 87% for women. So there's almost a 10% lower survival rate.
And that's due to the lateness in diagnosis.
Yeah, usually men put off going to a doctor. I mean, my family physician in Ohio looked at it and said an inverted nipple was nothing to worry about. Well, a family doctor for a woman notices an inverted nipple. Where does she go? To the hospital.
Right.
Right. I was told it was nothing to worry about. So it's not just men in general. Some physicians and everybody needs to become more aware. Mm-hmm. And that get it looked at. If we can get it in and get it diagnosed at stage 0 or stage 1, it's much better survival rate than when it's diagnosed at stage 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Good information. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the people that you have interacted with over the last 5 years. 5 years? How long?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Well, yeah, but it's been for the first 2 years. I wouldn't talk about it like most men are. Most men are ashamed. It's not a man's disease, okay? And boy, they really become defensive and withdrawn. And it took me a while. I wouldn't go out in public that summer. When I went home to Canada for the summer, I wouldn't go in a swimming pool without a shirt on.
Yeah. So there's a psychological piece of this. Of course, there's a psychological piece to any cancer, but
right.
This is a little bit different. So talk to me a little bit about the people that you've interacted with over these last few years and the kinds of, just the kinds of things that these folks experience. I know that a delay in diagnosis, a little bit of a embarrassment or a shame about it.
Yeah, and it's just a matter that for a man to be able to say, I have breast cancer, to get him to a point of being comfortable with himself, to be able to say, okay, it's not a normal. I'm in 1% of the male population, but I'm not a freak. I can get by and I can survive. I guess the greatest thing I had was Dr. Flado, who was the surgeon here when I went to see him. I mean, I was devastated the day he told me. But his very simply looked at me and said, okay, there's one way you can survive. He said, I wanted to postpone it for 3 or 4 days so I could play in a golf tournament. And he looked at me and he said, well, you know, I did this as a favor to your family doctor, who's a good friend of mine, to get you in this quickly. Why do you want to postpone it? And I said, well, I want to go play golf in our Ryder Cup. And he said, well, look you go, and instead of doing it Thursday, we'll do the surgery on Monday. He says, because what you're going to need is to remain positive throughout all of this. So you go out, play golf, and Monday we'll do the surgery, but you promise me that you will be positive throughout this whole experience. And that gets you a long way. You have to.
So as far as the surgery goes, what was the recovery time for you?
I was about 3 months before I was back playing golf.
Okay. So how large is your incision? How did they go in?
It went from about there to there. Mm-hmm. He did a modified radical rather than the full radical mastectomy because there's the potential of, when they take the lymph nodes out, you can lose movement in the arm and develop lymphedema. And he said that he would do a modified radical, and if that didn't, they'd go back later and do a full mastectomy, but he didn't want to ruin my chances of playing golf.
Yeah.
he was very, very understanding.
Very good. Now, because you have had a cancer diagnosis, are you considered at higher risk for other forms of cancer?
For prostate, yeah, there is a potential link. Nobody knows, but I mean, I keep a close eye on that. It's funny, through the website, I got contacted about 4 or 5 weeks ago from a man who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and 2 weeks later was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He has 2 primary cancers, which is relatively unheard of.
Wow. So it's a good thing you're in touch with him.
Yes,
I'm sure he's
yeah.
going to need that support.
Yeah. And
Let's do a little review of the information that we've provided today. First of all, breast cancer can happen to men.
yes,
Secondly, the breast cancer awareness campaign is the 3rd week in October.
right.
So everybody in Hernando County and Florida can watch for that, and more states are jumping on board.
Right.
The website for additional information or to contact you is malebreastcancer.ca,
Correct.
and your phone number is located there.
It's on the contact page. Yeah.
Okay, and then what we want to do is also share the link to your grant project that you recently did, which
Right.
is kind of a summary of what we've talked about today, and then some individual interviews. Is that correct?
Right. It's on pinkwell.org. The homepage for the Pinkwell Challenge organization will come up, and it'll have a Vote Now tab. Click on that and look for a Men's Pink video, and you can watch the video.
Okay, now are we supposed to be voting for something?
Yeah, it's each day everybody can vote once, and the organization that gets the most votes will gain a significant amount of money. It won't be our organization, but we do appreciate your support. We're very, very small and just starting out, but I think 3 weeks ago we had 225 people that had voted, different people, and we had about 1,700 votes.
Yeah, well, very good. Well, Mr. Wagner, again, it's been a delight talking to you. I really admire the work that you're putting into this, and I'm sure there are so many men out there and women, families, who appreciate the resources that you've provided since you have been diagnosed. The organization, again, is A Man's Pink. Mr. Herb Wagner is the founder and president. Please be sure and visit malebreastcancer.com.